Hi, Andy Tanner here. So excited to dive in to this next section of the cash flow section of the 4 pillars of investing. We're going to be speaking about position again, and we just finished up long position. So of course we're going to do short positions. Once a person does a fundamental analysis on a financial statement of a company or looks at their trend, we might find that they're in trouble, that expenses are up and income's down, liabilities are up, or assets are down, and cash flow's down, net worth down. And we see some frowny faces saying, you know what, the future doesn't look bright. Well, that's that. So the question is, well, how do we protect ourselves to survive tough times or even thrive? I mean, what if this were a sovereign fundamental analysis on your home country and you saw tough times coming? How do you position yourself? You probably have the idea that in the year 2007, 8, and 9, where we ran into some global problems, that many people were, lost a lot of value in their investments and really struggled, where other people thrived. So in the old days, when I used to teach the cash flow pillar, I'd say, look, things can go up, things can go down, things go sideways. It's our job here at the Cash Flow Academy to give you the opportunity and the knowledge to know that, whether it goes up, down, or sideways, there's a position to take that will benefit you, not only protect you, but benefit you. And you can make money in a long position when things fall down, there's no question. But when something is losing value and something is struggling, a short position is something to consider, and it's an opportunity, a possibility anyway, and we like to have in the toolbox. The reason I start with such enthusiasm, and the reason this is exciting to me, is simply because of the feedback we've had on this section over time in previous versions of the 4 Pillars class. We're always wanting to update and do better. And in this class, we're going to make it even better. But I anticipate that trend to continue. People love this section. So I'm going to break it down and take more time than I did ever before. We're going to have several sections. One section on long gets you the gist. We get it. Buy the stock, get the dividend, maybe have the stock grow. Wonderful. The shorting has such a larger opportunity to it, to think about things in a different way and to open up your mind. I anticipate that as we go through this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how money's made when something loses value. As I do this, you're going to feel within yourself, wow, I'm getting an awesome financial education. I'm learning things that other people generally don't know, and it gives you a way to think like a Warren Buffett might think. So with that, let's hop out of theater mode, and let's go down here maybe to slide 60 some odd something around here. And let's talk about a great lesson from my mentor, Robert Kiyosaki. So I remember one time we were in Phoenix and Robert got on stage, and he's a rugby player, and he kind of made the motion of kicking a rugby ball with his right foot. And he said this, he said, I have a right foot and I have a left foot. I do not have a right foot and a wrong foot. And then he took his hands out and put them in front of himself, and he said, I have a right hand and a left hand. I do not have a right hand and a wrong hand. And I think what he was attempting to teach me and the others that were in that room at the time was that we tend to invent a view of good and evil all the time. And that makes sense. It'd be natural if I was an amoeba, I don't do much thinking. It's pretty much this is good food and this is a predator to get away. I don't know how amoebas think, but in the animal kingdom, that's kind of what it is. Something's either good for me or bad for me. Good means runs towards it, bad means runs away. And we're kind of wired that way as human beings, and really any creature is wired to seek its own good interest and avoid bad things. And so we have a limbic system that makes us fearful when things are bad that might happen, and greedy that things are good that might happen. And it's just that go towards, stay away from, go towards, stay away from. There's so much go towards, stay away from that's wired in us. It's easy for us to say something is to label something as good or bad. Oh, he's a good person. Oh, she's a bad person. Oh, this is a good book. Oh, this is a bad book. Oh, this is a good restaurant. This is a bad restaurant. There's so much good and bad. But with investing, that can be unhealthy to a point. And so the word is going to be opposite. So let's do this, and I'm just going to freehand this, I think. I've drawn so many financial statements, but I think what I'll do on this one is move my mic over here and freehand this. This can be so much fun. So let's draw this right here very simply and just freehand it for a minute. Okay, there's my income statement and the balance sheet. And this will be the first section of many sections we're going to do on shorting. I'm not just going to do one section on it. We're going to be thorough. We're going to short a lot of different things here. So this will be fun. Is income, here we have income. Let's just put it here. And here we have expenses. And I'm going to ask you which one is good or bad. See the trick question? Which one's good and which one's bad? And a person might say, well, income is good and expenses are bad. They might say that, and they might even be right when they say it. Asset, liability. Liability, I don't know, is it A-T or T? I don't know. Liability, I don't even know how to spell it. Income, expenses, asset, liability. Which is better, an asset or liability? And so it's very, very easy for someone to say, well, income is good and expenses are bad, assets are good, liabilities are bad. I want lots of income, I don't want expenses, and I want lots of assets and I don't want any liabilities. Up, down, which is good? Well, most people think up is good and most people think down is bad. I want my 401k to go up. I don't want it to go down. And so we've just at the get-go, it's very easy for us to look at this in terms of right and wrong. And what happens then is we tend to focus on the income, to go up and the assets to go up and the expenses down, liabilities down. And I'm going to suggest that might change starting today. In fact, what if I told you that you might want to add more and more liabilities here, and that by doing so, you might never have to, you might like it better than the asset column, okay? Expenses are something that I love because the reality of it is the more expenses I have, it seems my quality of life goes up. Do you know that I can't tell you what your goal should be, but do you know that my goal is to spend more money next year than I did this year? And the next year after that and after that. I hope I spend more money every year until I die. Because you know what? The food that my son eats is a function of the money I spend on food. And the travel that we have is a function of the money I spend, not the money I make. It's really interesting. Making money doesn't bless my son's life. He only gets blessed when I spend it. In other words, money in the bank doesn't do anything, and money in an asset doesn't do anything. Until you spend it, you don't get the medicine, the food, the clothing, the experiences. I have to spend the money to now, sure, I have to earn it to spend it, but I like spending money because it's the quality of my life. And that sounds weird. I like spending money. It sounds weird. So what my invitation is to take Robert's lesson, and let's not look at income and expenses as good or bad, or assets and liabilities. Let's do a paradigm. One of the promises I made you when we started this course, I would create context, because when we create context, we learn better. The context is the soil, and the seed goes inside the soil. If we prepare the soil, we'll understand this. So this is all this rigmarole here about opposite is to help you see this in a neutral way. And once you see in a neutral way and get rid of the good and bad, then imagine this. Now when the stock market goes down, you might be happy because there's an opportunity there. And when the stock market goes up, you might be happy. And all of a sudden, they're both good things. See that? There's not a fear or panic of it going down. Right now, if you have a 401k or an RSP or superannuation, you might say, gee, I hope it doesn't, I hope the economy stays up. I hope it goes well. Some people think losing my job would be bad. Well, actually, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you because now you don't have to go to work anymore and build someone else's dream. You follow? Bad things, good things, I just like to look at them as opposite. So big, small, short, tall, smart, dumb, up, down, income, expense, asset, liability. Let's not look at these as good or bad anymore. Just for a moment, let's feel ourselves getting financially smarter by looking at them in a certain way. Income and expenses gives me what we call earnings, or we'll call it cash flow for now, or net earnings. And asset minus liabilities will give me a net worth number. And so what is the opposite of income? Expenses. What is the opposite of expenses? Income. Let's not look at them as income being good or expenses being bad. Asset minus liability. What's the opposite of a liability? An asset. What's the opposite of an asset? A liability. What's the opposite of cash flow? Net worth. Now watch this. What's the opposite of up and down? Now watch this. This could be a key moment for you. It seems simple because it is simple, and that's our promise, to be simple. And yet at the same time, it's very profound, and it's something that nearly 100%, in the high 99s here, nearly 100% of the investors I speak to miss this because they're so caught up in building the asset and getting rid of liabilities. And watch this. It's about what we acquire. So an asset are things that we own, and we talked about that long position before. And obviously, if we own things, we'd like them to go up. A liability, this is key, are things that we owe. So we could put those as opposites, couldn't we? As antagonists to each other. The things that we own pitted against the evil things that we owe. And do you see the good and bad already? Is the idea that I don't want to owe anybody anything, and I'd like to own or control everything, right? I'd like to own more real estate, own more stocks, own more power, but I don't want to owe anything to anybody. See the good and bad that comes in? And so it distorts our brain from the opportunity. Well, I'll show you something that you might find interesting. Let's use a blue arrow here, and I'll just do it this simply. If this goes up right here, what happens to my net worth? It goes up. Okay, now watch this. If this goes down, what happens to my net worth? Think about it for a minute. See if you can answer before I give the answer. If this goes up, my net worth goes up. But if this goes down, watch, my net worth goes up. Now pause for a moment and see the equality of that net worth over here. See that this is every bit the opportunity to increase net worth as this is. If this goes up $1, your net worth goes up $1. If this goes down $1, your net worth goes up $1. You see this? Let me say it again. If this goes up $1, your net worth increases $1. If this goes down $1, your net worth increases $1. So if I were to ask you the question, how do you increase your net worth? There would be two correct answers. Andy, I can buy something. Watch this. I can buy something that increases by $1, or equally effectively, I could borrow something that is going to decrease by $1. That is fascinating to think about. And it's a very simple lesson, but it is a lesson that people don't see. When they ask me the question, they seem perplexed. Andy, how do I possibly make money when something is going down? Well, it's very, very simple. Let me put it to you again. Repetition is the mother of learning. If I buy something and it goes here, the moment I buy it, it goes here. And if I buy it and it goes up in value, $1, then my net worth will go up $1. But if I borrow something and it goes down $1, my net worth increases $1. So I'm going to repeat it again. If you'd like your net worth to increase by $1, what are your choices? A, buy something that goes up $1 in value, or B, borrow something that goes down. A lot of people miss the fact that they could borrow themselves to wealth rather than buy themselves to wealth. When people come to me and say, I want you to teach me to invest, almost 100% of the time, people ask me what I think they should buy. Think about that. Andy, should I buy gold? Should I buy oil? Should I buy pork belly? Should I buy stocks? Should I buy real estate? Should I buy a business? What should I buy? Grain? Should I buy frozen concentrated orange juice futures? Should I buy bonds? What should I buy? What should I buy? What should I buy? People tend to think of investing as understanding what to buy. But I will tell you, we should give absolutely equal time to what we should borrow. Because if we buy right, our net worth increases, but it is equal. It is the same $1. That if we borrow correctly, we will become rich. And so there's a very simple idea here that is if we buy something, we want it to go up, but if we borrow something, we'd like it to go down. And as you learn the 4 pillars of investing, sometimes you'll see a fundamental analysis that suggests that it's going to increase in value. Then we buy it. But if we see an opportunity where the item is decreased in value, we have an equal opportunity to become wealthy by borrowing that item. So notice that we have opposites everywhere here. We buy things that are going up. We borrow things that are going down. Now let's look at let's put a circle around this because I don't want to mess it up. This is turning into be a pretty good looking chart here actually that we freehanded. So let's not mess this up. Let's take a picture of it so we have it and so we can refer to it and so we can keep it like this. See, that's what we want to do. Now let's draw on this a little bit more with another color ink. What if the thing that we own went down in value? Then our net worth would go down. And what if the thing we borrowed went up in value? Then our net worth would go down. So the reward is when we buy up stuff and borrow down stuff, and the risk is when we buy down stuff and borrow up stuff. Does that make sense? So we're going to stop looking this in terms of it's good to own things and bad to borrow things. No, it really doesn't matter to me. We're just going to say, look, if it's going up, my preference is to borrow it or to buy it and own it. And if it's going down, my preference is to borrow it. The risk is if it goes the other way. Notice how they're all equal and opposing. This is a story of opposites, not necessarily evil and good, even though evil and good are opposites. So I'm going to let you think about that for a minute. Don't overthink it. If you wanted to put some numbers in here, we absolutely could. We could say, let's say we own something that is 10 and it goes to 11. That would increase our net worth by $1. But let's say we owed something that was 11 and now it was only, and we were able to take that liability down to 10. Well, guess what? That would give us 1 as well. So it doesn't matter, whether something goes up or down. Think about this. It matters whether you bought it or whether you borrowed it. And so this is kind of fun stuff. So here we go. We'll come back to this. Okay, we're going to come back to this. In fact, I've kept this for this purpose, but I think this is a good stopping point. Okay, I very much believe that if you just pause and think about this and say, is there anything I'm missing on this? Anything I'm missing yet? And let your brain have time to get your head around it. You might have some epiphanies. In fact, let's give you one more before we take a little break here. Think about this idea. How much money do you have to buy something? Well, you've got to have whatever it costs, right, to buy it. And so buying requires cash. How much cash do you have to borrow things? Well, I'm not using any cash here. You see this? So over here, I've got to have, some amount of cash right here. Well, which is easier for the person who's just starting out to go into a bank? Is it easier to deposit money if you're broke or to borrow money if you're broke? Now, the engineer in the class is always going to say, well, it takes money to make money. You're going to have to prove the bank. Look, I get that. I understand. The bank's not going to loan you money if you can't pay it back. But the idea of being able to start with nothing, and not to have to allocate my money to something, that is an interesting concept. Let's talk about speed for a minute. Let's talk about speed. How fast can you buy things? How fast? What's the constraint? Let's say that you wanted to come up with $100,000. How long does it take you to put $100,000 in the bank by working at a job right now? Maybe it takes you 6 months. Maybe it takes you a month. Maybe it takes you 4 years. Whatever. It depends on what your income is. Maybe it takes you 2 years. How long does it take for you to come up with $100,000? How long does it take to save $100,000 for you? Write down the amount of time it'd take to save $100,000. Okay? Now watch this. How long would it take to borrow $100,000? It takes 10 seconds. It's to make a promise. So this saving comes from working for money. Borrowing comes from promising to pay it back once you figure it out. So which goes faster, getting $100,000 by working for it, or getting $100,000 because you borrowed it, right? And it's an interesting idea. When you look at this right here, what did they teach you in school about what you should do with money? This is called savings, right? Savings is where you keep the money that belongs to you. You own the money. It's your money. You put it in a savings account. Okay, this is called debt. This is a debt account. This is and what have they said is good and bad? They've said saving is what? Is good, and debt is what? Bad. That's what they've taught you. Guess what? What direction do you think the value of the US dollar is going? Do you think in the future the value of that US dollar is going to go up or down? See, people that are giving that advice to save and not use debt don't understand the reality of this math. And why in the world would you recommend saving money if it wasn't increasing in value? And so it's a really big mindset shift. It's not because it'd be hard to understand. It's because most people's context is so far off that seed can't be planted in their ground and grow. It's not that the seed isn't good. They reject the seed, not because the seed isn't good, but because the ground is barren. They say, look, this is a bad seed because it's not growing. And to me, I say, no, it's actually a good seed. It's just the ground is barren. And it takes no root, and the sun scorcheth, to speak biblically. And so the idea is that shorting is not a bad thing, but people reject it, not because it's not a good seed, but because their context is so brainwashed in saving good, debt bad, saving good, debt bad, that they have nervousness. Feel this context in your body right now before I move on, okay? Before I move on. Borrow lots of money. Borrow as much money as you can because it's going down in value. Does that resonate with you as positive, or does that resonate with you as negative? Is borrowing something scary for you? Is making a promise something that turns your stomach and makes you scared? It shouldn't. Because dollar per dollar, if you buy something that goes down, if you buy something that goes down, okay, that should be terrifying as much as borrowing something. Do you follow? Because dollar per dollar, at the end of the day, it's the same win or loss. It's just that borrowing is much faster and easier to do, where buying is hard to do because you got to come up with money to buy. You do not need to come up with money to borrow. So this, even if you don't understand it completely, or maybe you are having some aha moments, or maybe you're still confused, take inventory. See how you feel about this. But the one thing should be there. As early as I went through this, you'd feel like you're getting a financial education. Can you feel it? Can you feel that there are things here that people like Warren Buffett know that other people don't know? People that like Mark Cuban know that other people don't know? Do you feel like this is a world perhaps that the rich has been exploiting without your knowledge? while the schools have told you to save and stay out of debt because they say saving is good and debt is bad. Release yourself from the idea of saying, well, I have a right hand and an evil hand. Let's release ourselves of this falsehood that one of your hands is evil and one of your hands is good. No, they're just opposite. They just look differently. That's it. This is more reality and this is more fantasy, to have the good hand here and the bad hand here. No, it's just opposite. They're just opposite. Expense, income, asset, liability, cash flow, net worth, borrow, buy, owe, own, up, down. It's just opposite. So let's take a break and let you think about that for a minute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do example after example after example after example. How many is that? 3? Example after example after example. Let's do 3 of them. No, let's do example after example after example after example. Let's do 4 examples of how this works and illuminate you to where you'll say, you know what, I understand why this section is a student favorite. Be back with examples in the next section.